we're going to start with our first panel, with the first plenary session, the Virginia Legislative Update of 2011-2012. And you have in your program, we're going to hear from Claire Gastanaga, the principal of CG2 Consulting, and from Tim Freilich, the legal director of the Legal Aid Justice Center, the Immigrant Advocacy Program. In the program, as you can see, we have asked Mr. Tejada to be the moderator. He's not here. We apologize. We're moving this in order to get the schedule behind, but also when Walter comes here, he will give brief remarks. Thank you.
No one's ever said we weren't flexible or couldn't talk anytime we were asked to. So.
All right, well, I know the session is supposed to be about Virginia's General Assembly in Virginia, but it seems like with all the news going on right now, we should take a moment first to talk about Alabama. As I'm sure you've heard in the news, Alabama this year stole the We Hate Immigrants and People of Color award away from the state of Arizona. Alabama passed a state law called House Bill 56. Alabama, of course, has a long and disgraceful history of treating minorities and people of color poorly. But in case you thought Alabama had left all of that nastiness behind in the civil rights struggles of the last century, now they have given us House Bill 56. So let's take a look. Now, as we take a look at Alabama's House Bill 56, try not to get too distracted by thinking about what kind of state would even consider passing a bill like this. I mean, certainly one of the nastiest provisions in Alabama's new law is the one that requires elementary and secondary school officials to question students about their immigration status, and even their parents' immigration status. You've probably heard about how after this law went into effect, thousands of students failed to report to school the next day. Right? Parents were afraid that their child would go to school and then they'd be deported while their child was at school, leaving their child with no one to meet them when they got off the school bus. So although a court has temporarily blocked this part of the law, it's going to take a long time before immigrant parents are comfortable sending their kids to school in Alabama again. The damage is already done, even though it's been temporarily blocked. I mean, can you imagine what kind of state would try to use school children as bait to try and catch their undocumented parents? I mean, what kind of state would do that? Now, I sure am glad we live here in Virginia, where we recognize the importance, importance of educating the next generation of leaders.
Right.
We wouldn't even think about having school officials ask.
not even think of it. No, we thought of it in 2007, when Jackson Miller introduced a bill to do exactly that in the Virginia General Assembly. Unfortunately, that one died in House Education Committee, and we thought about it again in 2011, when Delegate Gilbert introduced a bill that actually passed the House of Delegates 73-25, but was killed in the Senate. So I'm sorry, Virginia is kind of ahead of Alabama.
So,
we just haven't done the damage.
I mean, just to make sure everybody's on the same page, you know, the bill has to pass the House and the Senate, and then get signed into law by the governor. So I guess you're saying it passed the House here?
Yeah, yes, 73-25, a very strong bipartisan vote.
All right. Well, how about this other part of Alabama's law, the new law? This will require employers to use the E-Verify system, right? That's that online tool that employers can use to verify the immigration status quickly. And they have a provision in this law that will require all Alabama employers to use the system starting on April 1st, 2012. It's like a bad April Fool's Day joke, right? I mean, with an estimated 11.5 million undocumented immigrants living, and many of them working here in the United States, why would any state want to suddenly require all of their employers to use the E-Verify system? They're going to verify what we already know. We have a lot of undocumented people supporting our economy here in Virginia, just like they do in Alabama. Now, it seems like it would be economic suicide. You're either going to have all these employers laying off people, or not able to hire them, or chasing these workers out of the state altogether. That way, you know, we can recognize the contribution of all of these hardworking immigrants to our economy without further destabilizing what we have. again, I'm just so glad we live here in Virginia and not in Alabama. You know the slogan. Oh, Virginia's for lovers. Right? Yeah, we're business lovers. Virginia's #1 for business. If we have a job that needs to be done, you come here to Virginia if you want to do it. That's what we say here.
Yeah, well, problem there, Tim. In 2011, we had a bill introduced, House Bill 1727. Actually, there were several bills introduced by a whole lot of different people that would have required all employers, Richard Anderson had this one, all employers with more than 15 employees to use E-Verify by December 1st of this coming year. And it passed the House 76-23, again on a very strong bipartisan vote, and was killed in the Senate, but it was not killed completely. In fact, it was amended. They were all merged together, and the bills were amended. Senator Barker carried one, Rich Anderson carried one. This 1727 was Carrico's bill. It was a guy running for Senate in Southwest Virginia. But they merged them all together, and we ended up with a bill that applies E-Verify to any employer with an average of 50 or more employees for the previous 12 months that wants a contract with the state for $50,000. And in 2010, we passed a law that says every state agency has to use E-Verify for all of its new incoming employees. And that wasn't supposed to go into effect until December of 2012, except that the governor ordered all the state agencies to begin complying with it back on July 1st of 2011. And you know what? Since 2008, we've had a state law that requires anybody doing business with state or localities to certify that they are in compliance with federal immigration law and will not, during the contract term, knowingly employ an unauthorized alien, setting up the possibility for them to lose their contracts and potentially be subject to criminal prosecution in the state. So, you know, and it's kind of, so it's not so different, you know?
Well, all right, well, that's employment and education. Those are just minor subjects. So you would have to be complete, you'd have to be one of those really completely crazy anti-immigrant states to consider one of these other provisions. There's this bill, or part of their law rather, House Bill 56, now says that police are allowed to check, state and local police are allowed to check the immigration status, as if they were federal agents, of anyone they stop and reasonably suspect is in the country unlawfully. I don't know how you tell that, but really, I mean, can you imagine what that would do to a state or say a county's community policing efforts? I mean, if you had a law like that, it would completely undermine the relationship of trust between the immigrant communities in that state and law enforcement. I mean, this is the law enforcement that is supposed to be protecting everyone in the community, not, you know, I mean, everyone in the community. And so if you have state and local police checking immigration law, why would any immigrant victim or witness of crime cooperate with the local authorities? And when immigrant victims and witnesses of crime stop cooperating with local authorities, it leaves everyone less safe, right? This isn't just about the immigrant, this is about our whole community. I'm so glad here in Virginia, we've decided to take that smart, focused approach of using our limited law enforcement resources to chase criminals and keep us all safe, rather than chasing immigrants, dividing families, and spreading fear. Virginia.
Right, okay, well, here's what you need to know. Virginia was the model for both the Arizona law and the Alabama law, in that Prince William was the testing ground. In Prince William, it was a county ordinance, but the language is the same. It was developed by the same people as Senate Bill 1079 in Arizona and HB 56 in Georgia. So that was what was proposed in Prince William, and what we ended up with is, as of 2008, instead of the police being required to check anybody they lawfully stop, if they reasonably suspect, we have a law that says any of us who get taken into custody have our status checked. So if you are arrested on any crime in Virginia and actually physically taken into custody on a statewide basis, you have your status checked. So, and moreover, the Attorney General of Virginia has sent an opinion out to every law enforcement agency in Virginia that says local law enforcement have the inherent authority to enforce criminal violations of immigration laws. So, you know, that wouldn't be so much of a problem, except we have some good things in Virginia, that there's a law that says if you commit a misdemeanor, you're supposed to get something like a ticket, like a summons. And there's a mandate that the police give you a summons and not take you into custody, except that there's a legislator who always wants to change that into a may so that, you know, police officers can use their discretion.
Wait, so a police officer on the street who's arresting somebody for a misdemeanor can just decide whether this particular person who's committed a misdemeanor is one that I should
And even under the current law, we're beginning to get anecdotal evidence that more people of color are being taken into custody than others, simply because it provides this opportunity for the statewide check. So, I mean, we're kind of, in some respects, we've been ahead of Arizona and Georgia. We did try to do something to mitigate by passing a statewide statute that would say that victims and witnesses of crime who are cooperating would not be asked their immigration status, which would have been a good thing. And that policy is in effect in Virginia Beach and Prince William and some of the local police departments. But even though Senator Howell, who was here, carried that bill 3 years in a row and it passed the Senate unanimously 3 years in a row, we couldn't get it through the House of Delegates. It died 10-10 last year on a tie-voting committee. So while some of the police departments are doing the right thing to enhance community policing even in this environment, we couldn't get the legislature to go along with a reasonable statewide policy. So, you know, and we've got statewide secure communities, which means that when you get checked, it goes up into the federal database in the sky with your fingerprints and comes back. So, you know, again, I know you want to feel good about Virginia, but...
I really do. All right, well, you know, we've been having fun up here, but this is serious business, and it's serious because the clear message is that Virginia's General Assembly, the House of Delegates in particular, like states such as Arizona, Alabama, and Georgia, the clear message that they're sending is that they are fed up with the failure on the federal level of Congress to pass comprehensive immigration reform. And they say, well, if the feds aren't going to do it, then, well, we're going to do what we can right here within our power in Virginia, in Richmond, in the General Assembly. We're going to do what we can to enforce immigration law. If they're not going to, we'll do it, right? So that's what's happening. And now I know that many of the leaders in the House of Delegates would say, oh, no, we're not, these aren't anti-immigrant laws. They would really take issue with us describing some of these proposals as anti-immigrant laws. They'd say, no, these are anti-illegal immigrant laws, right? Well, the problem with that statement and that argument is it fails to recognize a key characteristic of immigrant families here in Virginia and throughout the U.S., and that is that you have a huge number of what we call mixed status families, right? Where you have U.S. citizen children maybe living with one or more undocumented parents. Well, I mean, it doesn't take much to draw the connection there. If you pass a law that's targeted to, you know, trying to hurt undocumented immigrants, right? Well, if their kids are U.S. citizens, you're going to be hurting not just undocumented immigrants. You're going to be hurting lawfully present immigrants, U.S. citizens. You're going to be
not to mention the fact that some of the laws are hard to dress up as being about people who are here without authority. I mean, like the bill that was proposed to say you can't take the driver's license test in the language other than English anymore. And 8% of people who get their driver's licenses do that in Virginia. And guess what? You can't get a driver's license if you're not here legally. So who does that hurt? And then the bill that said you can't speak English in the workplace. I mean, you have to speak English in the workplace. You can't speak a language other than English in the workplace. That was definitely about people who are here without authority.
Yeah, right? Sure. You know, just use language. That's it. Anyway, so we're going to give a quick overview of the bills that we've seen in the past. We've talked about a few of them, what we expect to see again in the future, and what we expect to see for the first time, along with a couple of positive bills that we'll be pushing this year. And then, after all that, we're going to try to raise everybody's spirits after this somewhat depressing look at all these legislative proposals and things going on by talking about the changing demographics in Virginia and letting you know how you can get involved.
Here's what was in your packets is an article I wrote, and attached to that also is a list of the current Virginia state laws applicable to aliens and immigrants. You know, it lists almost 50 different legislative, I mean, these are laws, these aren't proposals. This is already on the book in Virginia, and they have to check your status and report you to the immigration and, to ICE. Because, you know, of course, back in those days, we wanted to make sure that people who were not fully capable got sent home, because...
These bills had their origination in laws to improve our genetic stock.
Yeah, the eugenics movement, for which the legislature has apologized. But I just, it isn't like this started yesterday, or even, when I started working for the Virginia Coalition in 2003. I mean, the first real movement in the kind of new era of anti-immigration legislation in Virginia started with the 2003 law to mandate that you have to show legal presence to get a driver's license. And we've now enacted that with the statewide immigration check on custodial arrest, a presumption against bail for people here without authority. If, once you check their status, you find out that they're not here with authority, then there's a presumption against bail. And then there's a legal presence requirement for state-funded social services that's been in place since 2005. And so even though we're ahead of many other states in those respects, we have defeated some bills, like we have defeated the Alabama school enrollment status check twice. Last year was problematic because it didn't get killed in committee. It got killed after it had passed one house. We have defeated harboring bills that would make it illegal for anybody to harbor a person who's here without authority, including organizations like the Unitarian Church and the Catholic Diocese who are providing basic subsistence services. We have defeated a bill like Georgia's law that authorizes suits against employers by persons who are alleging that they've been denied a job when an undocumented person is hired. Cuccinelli, now Attorney General Cuccinelli, then Senator Cuccinelli offered that legislation when he was in the Senate.
I just want to restate that. Did everybody understand what that proposal did? That is, if I'm an employer and I hire somebody who is undocumented, you can sue me if you're a U.S. citizen or authorized to work. You can sue me. So it sort of tries to put the immigration enforcement, federal immigration enforcement, in the hands of private employers.
And private citizens. Without any real
Right.
connection. They don't have to show that they got fired. I mean, it's, We've also defeated a prohibition on any not-for-profits serving undocumented persons if they receive state or local funds. So we've had some successes. We've also passed in one house a Virginia version of the DREAM Act in the Senate several times, but we couldn't get it through the House.
There's a separate session later today on the DREAM Act, right, which is a piece of federal legislation. Claire's referring to the effort to allow in-state tuition, allow individuals who've grown up and graduated from high school here in Virginia, even if they're undocumented, to then apply to colleges, public colleges and universities here in Virginia, and be at least eligible to try to qualify for in-state tuition rather than out-of-state tuition. There's a key distinction, though, in that the federal DREAM Act actually provides a path to legal status, regularization of status for the undocumented students. Okay, there's nothing we can do on the state level that would give a lawful immigration status to these same students. So
it's really an educational opportunity,
right.
though.
That's probably a better way to talk about it. There's a big difference between what we can do on the state level potentially and what the federal DREAM Act would do.
Right. So what do we expect to see again? I mean, this is the part that's supposed to begin to get your juices flowing as we move into talking about what you can do. This session in 2012 probably will be as difficult a session as we've had since 2008, when there were 130 bills introduced that were anti-immigrant in their inception or in their effect. I fully expect to see the school enrollment status check come back again. The fact that the courts have not allowed it to go into effect in Alabama is not going to dissuade our guys.
The constitutionality of the bill seldom puts the brakes on some of the
proposals. They say that's the court's job to decide, not theirs. I expect to see a proposed ban on any admission of any undocumented person to Virginia public colleges and universities, even at out-of-state rates.
And this is one that we've seen a few times
and defeated in the past. I expect to see the bill to try to give police officers more discretion when issuing summonses or taking people into custody again, where there is a bill introduced that says that police officers shall check status if they have a reasonable suspicion that somebody is here without authority. I expect to see a harboring bill. I expect to see statewide E-Verify for all businesses, all sizes. I expect to see a ban on business and professional licenses being given to undocumented people. which is essentially a legal presence requirement for issuing those. And I expect to see the potential for the follow the money bill again, the bill that says if a charity gets state or local funds, that they can't serve anybody unless they ascertain that they're lawfully present. You know, that's not, I mean, we've seen a lot of that stuff over and over again. We've defeated it over and over again, but qualitatively, we're at a different point in time. And the success that they've had, I use that term hesitatingly, and with a certain level of sarcasm, the success they've had in Alabama and Georgia will incentivize our guys to think that these bills that have been defeated in the past could come forward again. And again, a lot of the stuff we started out being able to kill in committee on either side, increasingly they've gotten through the House of Delegates on a strong bipartisan vote, and it's really been the Senate that has stood in the way of passing a lot of this stuff. And then we expect to see some really nasty stuff for the first time.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to this part about, you know, how every person who rents a house or sells a house has to make sure they're selling to somebody who has documentation.
Well, and it's sort of beautiful at this point because, you know, we've exported our bad immigration enforcement ideas from the state level out to other states. Well, now it's about they're giving some bad ideas back, right? So if you look at Alabama, if you look at Georgia and South Carolina and start going through, you know, most of these bills have actually been written by lobbying groups here in DC that export model legislation out to the other states. And so there's a tremendous amount of sharing. So some of the...
And there's a nationwide group of state legislators called State Legislators.
National Council of State Legislators.
No, not NCSL. NCSL documents what's happening.
Right.
The state legislators for legal immigration are essentially collaborating on introducing all these, you know, bills that look alike in all the various states. And if there's a ban on contracts, you can't get utilities, you can't lease, you know, you can't lease a home, you can't form an employment contract, which would mean you can't even subcontract. You know, it could make it a felony for you to enter into a business transaction. There's just all kinds of things. And Lenny, you're telling us 10 minutes, but.
Well, so we're going to have to just, you know, keep moving along.
Right. Okay.
Excellent. So
you want to have Q&A
time?
Yeah, we'll have questions. Okay. Time for question and answers here at the end. Okay. Other key parts of the Alabama law.
Yeah, let's get to the positive stuff. All right. Yeah.
So the first part of this was to scare you.
Yeah.
It's good that you're all here today. That's the first major positive step.
Yeah.
Okay, so here are some of the positive bills that we're talking about. The Virginia Coalition of Latino Organizations has been talking about pushing some of these. Others are ones that, increasing access to health care for low-income Virginia immigrants. There's a woman named Jill Hankin at the Virginia Poverty Law Center who has done a tremendous amount of work on that.
There's something in the packets about that bill.
Okay, so you have, in your packet also, there's an entire explanation sheet on the Medicaid expansion.
And that's about legal immigrants. I mean, federal law says you can't get Medicaid as a legal immigrant until you've been in the country 5 years unless the state specifically authorizes it. And so what this does is essentially say we want, you know, pregnant moms and their kids particularly to be able to have access to Medicaid, even if they haven't been here 5 years.
Right, Virginia is way behind most states, way behind. So the other would be the in-state tuition bill that we talked about. And really quickly, you know, in my conversations with Edgar Aranda, the chair of the Virginia Coalition of Latino Organizations, he's really stressed how much, you know, we're hearing from young people in Virginia about wanting to do something positive. And, you know, Claire and I actually have a little bit of a difference of opinion on this. We've talked about it. I think it's critically important that our young people in the immigrant communities have something that they can look at and get to meet each other and organize around. Claire points out that the chances of, for example, Virginia's House of Delegates passing an access to in-state tuition bill, right, very small, okay? At the same point,
10.
You know, we're going to be, you know, almost certainly fighting a ban on access to public colleges and universities for the undocumented. You know, the testimony that these young students provide is some of the most powerful testimony you'll hear on any subject when they get up there and tell their own personal stories. And I think there's tremendous value in that. So that's one of the bills that we'll be looking for a sponsor for as well. I think Bacalao will be. So, all right.
Now, there's a whole session on demographics, so let's hit a couple
We're
of
going
high
to just
points.
hit a few high points here. One of the more exciting ones, more than 11% of Virginians were born outside of the United States. Right? More than 11%. Let's have a quick show of hands. Where do you think the largest block of those foreign-born immigrants come from? Europe, Asia, Africa, Oceania, Latin America, or Northern America? How many people say Europe? Foreign-born people living in Virginia. Asia. Africa. Latin America. All right. So, and Northern America is the other one? Yeah. Oh, not to leave out Oceania. Okay. So the answer is still, by a squeaky margin, the majority of Virginia's foreign-born are from Asia at 39.7%, followed by Latin America at 37%. The Latinos are catching up, but we'll see. Anyway, a couple key points that we want to make about the demographic changes here. Of Virginia's 911,000 foreign-born folks living here in Virginia, more than half of the foreign-born are not U.S. citizens, right? So that means while the numbers are up, there's a huge percentage who are not able to vote, right? Because they're not U.S. citizens. So that's a key thing to think about when you're trying to gauge, well, wow, the numbers are here, but why aren't we having the impact yet politically? Between 2000 and 2010, though, statewide, the number of, to use the demographic term Hispanics, I prefer Latinos, but Hispanics is the technical term, almost doubled to 632,000 Hispanics in Virginia.
That's people born here and foreign-born.
Yep, together. 8% of Virginia residents are Hispanic. And here's the key point. A third of them are younger than 18 years old, right? So that's a problem for right now because those that are younger than 18 still can't vote, right? But many, many of them are U.S. citizens, right? And so you see where this is going, right? They can't vote yet. And so that is the key right there. The state's Asian population has also surged in the last 10 years, climbing by by about 68% since the last census. So how is it that these laws are getting passed? Well, like we talked about, you have many of the individuals who make up these minority groups not able to vote. They're disenfranchised. If you look, for example, at Prince William County, where we had some of the harshest anti-immigrant measures taking place, there Hispanics and Latinos made up 20.3% of the population. Again, one-fifth of the population. But the problem, again, many of them are not eligible to vote. In Prince William County, more than half, 53%, can't yet vote.
And then, in a significant part, there are a large number of people in Prince William County with temporary protected status, which means they'll never be able to vote. I mean, even if they've lived here 12 or 14 or 18 years, the Federal Register could come out in March and say they no longer have temporary protected status and they have to go home. And there's no path to adjusted status for TPS folks. So you have this county, which is now majority-minority, in which the majority really has no say in the political process. And so it's up to those of us who do have a say to stand with them and for them in being advocates. And you add to that the fact that we're the only state in the nation without an automatic restoration of rights for anybody who's ever been convicted of a felony, for any kind of felony, even a shoplifting felony. We just have a whole lot of folks that are disenfranchised or people of color community.
So that's how these laws are still getting through. And now we're going to be, we have 5 minutes, this is great. We're going to leisurely talk about how you can get involved.
Let me talk about the pyramid first.
Yes,
okay.
The pyramid.
The pyramid. I can't make a pyramid because, the pyramid. What is really important for y'all to understand is people who come for lobby day, they are at the very tippy top of the pyramid. And the success that we have in influencing legislation is very much affected by what's below the tip of the pyramid, or the tip of the iceberg, or whatever you want to call it, which is a huge, wide swath layer at the bottom, which I call education and awareness, where people need more information, need to better understand the actual facts. When I tell people that if you're a Filipino and you want your brother to come here, if you didn't apply 30 years ago, he ain't gonna get here in your lifetime. Because, you know, it takes 30, there's racial classifications in our immigration laws that affect even whether you can bring your family here. People are stunned. I mean, so we have a lot of education and awareness to do about, you know, what's really happening, what's going on, positive contributions, the reality of immigration, all that stuff. The next widest swath is actual direct action, and it involves getting involved in campaigns. It involves getting out there to vote. It involves talking to the people who are running for office about your concerns and making the fact that you are in their districts and care about this issue known. You can call it politicking, you can call it electioneering, you can call it direct grassroots activity, whatever it is, it's about active engagement and taking that educational information and communicating it to the people who make a difference. And then you show up to lobby on lobby day. Where because of all that, you know, work that you've done foundationally, those conversations actually can make a difference. But, you know, this is not about coming one day a year and showing up. It's about 365 days a year of effective action.